Former President Jacob Zuma has responded to comments that were made by some government officials about his term in the presidency. This includes policy and major decisions that were taken during his time. President Cyril Ramaphosa, during an interview in Davos, recently touched on the country's policy decisions taken in the past 9 years.
When we came here, we brought a message of renewal. Almost optimism about our country, and actually saying that we have come through a very dark period over the last 9 years where there was policy uncertainty, where state institutions had been captured, and where corruption had run rife in our country. And we have been saying to everyone here in Davos, for South Africans, we're putting that behind us. We're now in a new dawn. We are in a new period, a period that has by and large been embraced by many South Africans. South Africans, much as we went through a technical recession where they suddenly felt very depressed, are now feeling a lot more hopeful that the economy will grow and that the political situation is improving and that we're dealing with corruption.
Well, for more on this, we're now joined by political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze, who's in our Pretoria studios. Prof, thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the program. So, we have been hearing these comments over time. Various party leaders in the ANC and in government talking about ground that had been lost in the last 9 years and that there was a new order and a new way of doing things. And then President Zuma, former President Zuma, started yesterday with a tweet where he says, "It's with unease that I must bear witness to certain recent comments and attitudes that, if not questioned, threaten to become prevailing wisdom and even new status quo in the ANC." Talking about the wasted 9 years, why do you think he's coming out in this way now? Is it enough is enough, do you think that he feels?
Well, we've seen lately, the last number of months actually, that President Zuma wants to put himself in a very, very prominent position. Was campaigning in KwaZulu-Natal. He was with the ANC's launch of its election manifesto in Durban in a very prominent position. And I think he wants not to be seen as the forgotten president. To some extent, what the situation President Mbeki was in after 2008. At the same time, I think he positions himself to be a key person in the context of KwaZulu-Natal. So whenever there's therefore negative references to him, the fact that his legacy is downplayed, that he is not regarded as a president that made positive contributions to the ANC and to South Africa in general, then it is an inherent threat for him, for that strategy that he has in mind at the moment. Therefore, he has put forward the whole track record of his term about the changing around of HIV/AIDS, about the increase in the life expectancy, the establishment of becoming member of BRICS, for example, the National Planning Commission's National Development Plan, and so on. He provided a whole list of that. But I think what was interesting is that he said, don't isolate me for the problems of the ANC that the ANC and government experienced in the past 9 years. You all who are members of the ANC are co-responsible for it. Don't make it my problem. You all participated in the decision-making process. So I think that is also implicitly a response to President Ramaphosa of saying, but you actually were the deputy president and therefore co-responsible for some of the things that happened.
How might they be able to respond to that? Because, on the face of it, he does make a very good point that you're pointing to me as an individual, but, it was us together.
Yes, that is indeed so, and the ANC over the last number of years always used the concept of collective responsibility, not the responsibility of individual. When it comes to government, the executive or the cabinet, they also talked about co-responsibility and wanted to avoid that one individual minister is accused of something. So in that sense, there is a definite logic in what President Zuma is saying. And then also what is interesting is that he takes it further and he says that the losses in the metros in Gauteng was because you refused me to participate in the campaigning in 2016. So it's evidence that because I was absent, the ANC actually experienced losses. Now again, it sounds a very logical argument, but what he doesn't do in his statement that he issued is to refer to the problems that we are seeing, for example, now at the Zondo Commission, earlier on the Nugent Commission, and all the PIC's Commission, and all these other matters, the decline in the economic growth since 2008 actually, and many of the other problems that we are very familiar with, problems with the quality of service delivery. He doesn't refer to that. He rather refers to the increases or the improvement of infrastructure and the electrification and water supply and so on, but doesn't mean to mention the downside of the fact that the public in general responded to it sometimes in negative terms, especially when it comes to the quality of the services associated with it. So there's a counter narrative that's in a sense obviously absent from his presentation.
Do you think that with the election that's coming through now, much as he says that during the local government elections they didn't want him to campaign in Gauteng in particular, do you think that it's important for the ANC to try and find a way to distance the current ANC, inverted commas, to that period of time, lest the voters say, but you were in it together, therefore voting for you is voting for the same thing that we've been seeing for the past 9 years?
I think this is the delicate balance that the ANC would like to develop, is first of all to involve President Zuma, especially in the context of KwaZulu. We look at the contribution that KwaZulu-Natal's votes made to the total of the ANC, for example, in 2014 with the national and provincial election, it was 21% of the total, so it's very significant. So if there's a decline or a stay-away vote in KwaZulu-Natal, it can affect the ANC very negatively. At the same time, as you mentioned, it is about the moral issues of the ANC. The presentation made by President Ramaphosa to say that in fact it's a new ANC, it's a reborn ANC, it's an ANC that goes back to its roots, to its original values. And in that context, President Zuma is obviously very complicates the situation. In the context, for example, of what we see with the State Capture Commission and the other issues associated with it, the fact that he must appear in the next number of months again in court, these are all complications, and we will have to see how the ANC is going to balance the two, because there is still some, as I said, some value for involving President Zuma in very specific aspects of the ANC's campaign. I think what they try to avoid is that President Zuma develops another national profile, because at the moment he is actually sort of boxed into KwaZulu-Natal, but he hasn't yet been involved in the national campaign of the ANC. And it appears to me as if that might be the approach or the strategy for the election campaign in general.
We've run out of time, but very briefly, towards the end, he says, I never once blamed any predecessor or pointed to any perceived failing of any of my predecessors when I came into leadership. So that's a direct dig at President Ramaphosa. And I just wonder, does this suggest a strained relationship between the two? And will the ANC lose ground if there's a perception that these two men are not working in union?
Well, that is certainly in reference to President Ramaphosa in very negative terms. I don't think it's factually actually correct, because if we looked how President Zuma treated President Mbeki, it was also very problematic. I think in the end it is very difficult for, as I said, President Ramaphosa to completely disassociate him with President Zuma. But then at the same time, I think the core of his message is to say, I'm actually going to officiate over a completely new government. I distance myself from President Zuma and his past and the way in which he governed. Exactly the same as what President Zuma did in 2008 when he became the president. He said, well, this is a new dispensation. It's the post-Mbeki dispensation. And I think President Ramaphosa is going to try to do the same after this election.
All right, Professor Dirk Kotze, thanks very much indeed for joining us on our studios in Pretoria, giving us his thoughts and analysis on former President Jacob Zuma's thoughts about comments that have been made about his 9 years in office. Now, as